Right, so Keir Starmer as Prime Minister is supposed to be working to calm this rioting situation down, isn't he? It is his job, it is his responsibility. It's the sort of thing he was elected to do, isn't it? Instead, he's put out a message of praise in light of apparent fears raised by the Jewish community. Now, any fears they may have in society, of course, genuine ones, should be addressed. But rioters aren't after them on the whole. Their skin colour doesn't generally invoke religious hatred against them. More often than not, they will of course be white. Yeah, that is very much what has been behind the riots, of course. People's skin colour and, well, the religion of people who might be of a non-white persuasion. The attacks on immigrants, the rhetoric driving that from our mainstream media, our politicians, not least Starmer himself. And as my dear friend Dr Louise Raw opined to, Starmer's statement of essentially thoughts and prayers for the Jewish community despite the riots going on right now and the racism that happens to be pushing them, she said, thank God there isn't any Islamophobia. Right, so, Keir Starmer, the man in charge, the Prime Minister, the guy who is supposed to be promoting unity at a time of great division in our country and in our society. Division he himself has played a part in his attacks on Bengalis, in his demands of a Welsh Islamic centre to tell Hamas to return the hostages, his backing of the cutting off of food and power in Gaza, the Home Office now planning raids on nail bars and the likes, looking for migrants. The list goes on and has now gone and made things even worse than that, because right now, whilst all of this is going on, he puts out the most tone-deaf tweet going despite the rioting going on around us. The rise of anti-Semitic incidents in the UK is deeply concerning. Jewish people and all those from faith communities deserve to feel safe on our streets. I'd like to thank the CST for their action. We will work together to eradicate discrimination of any kind. Right, so we're witnessing a rise in anti-Semitic incidents, are we? Now, I appreciate that there will be Jewish people of colour in this country, but when most are white, when was the last time a Jewish person was told to go back to their own country on the basis of their own faith, for example? We are right now seeing attacks on mosques. I've not seen a story of a synagogue being set on fire in the same way during these riots, and frankly, if it had been, I'd expect it to have been headline news, because frankly, that's how our media functions these days as well. Hierarchy of racism. I didn't coin the phrase, but examples of it when it comes to Starmer's Labour and our media just keep coming, and I've referenced it on more than one occasion. Why don't Muslims have Starmer's unconditional support as well? Are they not innocent victims of these riots too? Are they just an afterthought in that tweet? Are they not living in fear right now? Starmer ignoring them just gives the impression they count for less, certainly less than Jewish people. Though even that, given Starmer's track record, depends upon being his kind of Jew. So what prompted this tin-eared, tone-deaf response from Starmer when we know it is skin colour and Islamophobia by knuckle-dragging racists, having been incited by the sort of racists with plummy voices and dressed in sharp suits driving these riots right now? His comments doing nothing but sowing more division. The barbed swipe from Louise Raw saying what she, I and many others have thought about all of this too, as she put that sarcastic tweet to him. Well, he did tell us there in that tweet as well, because he offered his praise to the CST, the Community Security Trust, who, amid all the racial and Islamophobic rioting, decided now was the best time to put anti-Semitism back on the agenda by dropping their latest report on the 8th of August, the same day Starmer rushed to respond to it, incidentally, got to keep the Israel lobby happy. Well, the Community Security Trust is a registered charity here in the UK, set up to protect Jewish people from anti-Semitism and related threats, and in that alleged remit work with the police, Jewish organisations, synagogues and the like, providing security advice, and they have apparently got some 90 staff working across London, Manchester and Leeds in these roles. The CST's latest report, 42 pages of it, concerns cases of anti-Semitic incidents that they've recorded in the first half of this year, claiming 1,978 incidents, which they say is a 105% increase. Now, of course, should any of those be genuine, that is terrible, and should be condemned as much as any other racist incident. But the problem with the CST is their stats when it comes to this organisation specifically. It begs to question how much of that was truly anti-Semitism and how much actually was anti-Zionism, having had that accusation of muddying the waters between the two levelled at them for quite a while. And it's worth listening to this clip of a Radio 4 interview with Mark Gardner, the chief executive of the CST, discussing distinctions between Jewish people in light of the anti-Israel marches. This clip dates back to March of this year, incidentally.
What do you think about this idea? It's quite a claim, isn't it, that London is now a no-go zone for Jews on a Saturday?
I think as a headline, it's deeply troubling, but it also contains a huge element of truth. I don't go into town when there's these demonstrations. My family and friends don't go into town when there are these demonstrations. We collected evidence with London Jewish Forum and submitted it to the Mayor's office, submitted it to the Metropolitan Police. We had dozens and dozens of replies within the space of about 2.5 hours. We had to actually tell people to stop sending us their statements again and again and again. Just people saying, I'm not going into town at the weekend because of these demonstrations. I don't want to be trapped on the underground with these people. I don't want to see them marching. I don't want the risk that they realise that I'm Jewish and start shouting abuse at me, etc., etc.
Have people actually experienced that abuse?
Yeah, of course they have. If you speak up, you know, we hear all about the right of the protesters to demonstrate, but God forbid anybody should say anything against them. Then you'll find out about your freedom of speech and just how much they adhere to that principle.
What about the idea, and we've heard this from people on the marches, that there are thousands of Jews attending the protests?
Well, there are two types of Jews who attend the protests in the main. Firstly, you have ultra-Orthodox Jews who believe that the state of Israel prevents the Messiah from coming. Then you have revolutionary socialist Jews who are there as revolutionary socialists, using their Jewishness so that people get the impression that this movement is not fundamentally anti-Semitic. Now, the problem
how
here
can you be
is
sure of that?
because those are the banners that they march under.
London is a no-go zone for Jews was the query put to Gardner, and he broadly agreed with that. Agreed that he didn't want anything to do with the anti-Israel marches, that he avoided them himself, and when put to him that there were Jewish people involved in the marches, he decided to make distinctions between two types of Jews, essentially. Those on the march and those who would not be on the march. Ultra-Orthodox Jews, as he put it, who are against the idea of a Jewish state. Many Jews, whether Orthodox or not, balk at Israel being described as such anyway. But he also brought up revolutionary Jews or socialist Jews whose presence serves to legitimise these marches as not being anti-Semitic. They will be the ones marching. Other Jews who will not be anti-Israel wouldn't be seen on these marches. Now, am I wrong in my impression of that recording that Gardner is basically implying that there is a right sort of Jew and a wrong sort of Jew? And am I wrong in interpreting Gardner's words that marching against what Israel is doing in Gaza would therefore be an anti-Semitic thing to do? Going back to the CST report, they tried to make a distinction between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism as well in that, but in my view made a pig's ear of it. Here's a short excerpt. For example, the terms Zionist and Zionism will often be used in arguments about Israel and the Middle East. Sometimes they are used accurately and legitimately, and at other times they are deployed in an anti-Semitic way. CST must distinguish between the occasions when these terms are used in a purely political sense and the times when they are abused as euphemisms for Jewishness and Jews. Similarly, the phrases Zionist lobby and Israel lobby, when they are deployed indiscriminately as a label for Jewish organisations and individuals, regardless of whether they are relevant to the matter being discussed, connect the conspiracy theory that Jews have a disproportionate political power and influence with the anti-Semitic trope that Jews are not to be trusted. Drawing out these distinctions and deciding on where the dividing lines lie is one of the most difficult areas of CST's work in recording and analysing hate crime. Now, I have a big problem with anyone painting any individual of a protected characteristic, be it racial or religious or sexuality, whatever, being discriminated against for that reason. Taking what the CST wrote there, therefore, if I talked about a Jewish lobby, for example, being in control, that would certainly play into that anti-Semitic trope they described. The CST described there about Jews being in positions of influence and power. The trouble is, they didn't say Jewish lobby, did they? They applied that definition, that racist trope, to the terms Israel lobby and Zionist lobby. They are perfectly legitimate descriptions of lobbying entities because they have nothing to do with religion in and of themselves. They are political. Israel is a nation. It is a political body. Zionism is a political ideology. And so between Gardner's awful interview responses and the CST's own report just released, the accusation levelled at them for blurring the lines between what is anti-Semitism and what is anti-Zionism continues, in my view, to be a valid one. The problem with that is it undermines any good work they might have actually done to tackle the real thing, and how much of their stats are skewed by that as a result. Contrast Starmer's hailing of their work, though, to his communications with the people genuinely threatened in the riots right now. Muslims, most notably. People of colour, often certainly, far more often than not. Where Starmer couldn't respond fast enough to the CST's report dropping after a week of riots, with more still allegedly planned to come, still Starmer cannot get a grip of the situation. He and his government have been completely ignoring the Muslim Council of Britain, the largest Muslim organisation in the UK, for the whole week. The hierarchy of racism yet again demonstrated under Starmer, as this excerpt from Middle East Eye explains. On the 31st of July, after a mob attack on a mosque in Southport, the MCB, Muslim Council of Britain, said it had written to the Home Secretary seeking reassurance for the protection of mosques and communities. MEE sources in the MCB said that the organisation has not had any communication in response. The Home Office referred Middle East Eye to its introduction of emergency security for mosques nationwide, which it announced on the 4th of August. The Cabinet Office referred Middle East Eye to a statement by Labour's Communities Minister Alex Morris on Friday the 2nd of August, which said that there are no plans for ministers to meet with the Muslim Council of Britain. Can you imagine Starmer saying such a thing to, for example, the Board of Deputies? I'm not meeting with you. Well, he wouldn't, would he? It's complete dereliction of duty, therefore, to not meet with a body which is basically a Muslim equivalent, to ignore community representation of an ethnic minority like that. But then Labour are also apparently in talks to set up an alternative to the Muslim Council of Britain, which they will liaise with. What is wrong with the Muslim Council of Britain itself then? Not Starmery enough? By running to the Israel lobby, as the CST ostensibly can be viewed as, in the middle of a public crisis on our streets, as rioters go after Muslims and people of colour, Starmer isn't bringing communities back together. He's prioritising some of the community above the other. He's therefore sowing the divisions, taking sides, standing with his sort and ignoring others. Standing with his preferred sort of people. Racism is becoming a bigger issue under his leadership, not less. We saw it in the Labour Party. Now we're going to see it in government and throughout our country. And racism of all kinds, where people of colour and of Muslim faith appear to matter less than predominantly white Jewish people do. But only the right kind of Jew, it seems. The non-protesting pro-Israel types at that. He will continue to inflame tensions and make matters catastrophically worse. And his response to the CST versus the MCB frankly rubber stamps that unfortunate truth. Calling it out, though, might be about to become a lot more difficult as Starmer now turns his sights on social media. An attempt to gag the rioters possibly, but doing so by gagging all of us at the same time perhaps? I certainly wouldn't put it past him. He doesn't like being criticised himself. But check out this story in this video recommendation here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.